Welcome to Thoughtful Life Coach. My name is Tanya. Today I have the pleasure of having with us Nnenna, a licensed therapist. We are going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about what to look out for, and always consult with your primary care, or if you don't have a therapist, definitely look for one after this session. And I'm glad to have you here. Hi, Nnenna, how are you?
I am doing well, thank you, Tanya. How are you?
I'm doing great. Could you mind introducing yourself for the people?
Sure. My name is Nnenna Uneke, so that's my last name, and I am a licensed mental health therapist in Massachusetts. And currently I work with one of the community mental health care in Framingham, and I work with all populations. So it's been a tough few years, 2.5 years for almost the whole world, and there's definitely been an increase in depression, anxiety, alcohol, substance use, and of course it's evident on TV with the opioid crisis, which started way before, but has certainly gotten worse. So it's been a very, very busy 2+ years for the mental health field.
So when you start working with clients who have depression, because there's different level of depression, as you might know, what's the best course, or better yet, how would a patient aware that this is when they need to reach out for assistance, for help?
Absolutely. So we have a diagnostic manual for diagnosing any mental health illness, and people have to meet certain criteria to be fully diagnosed. Now, for people who have reached because there's the frequency and there's the severity, so people who have reached that severity level of clinically depressed, they have to meet this criteria, which is, consistent low mood, low energy, low motivation, sadness, feeling of hopelessness, inability to focus, and of course some people just not being able to get out of bed or feel like there's anything to live for. So that's when it becomes very dangerous, and you need to be seeing a therapist.
Okay, so as it's something that has to be prolonged, right? We all hit depression at some point.
So the statistics shows that about 80% of individuals at some point in their lives will experience something that would kind of make them sad or kind of throw them off a little bit. But when it starts to go past a certain period, like if you're not getting out of bed for 2 weeks, that's definitely a concern. I think it's easier to ask for help when you can recognize, this is not normal, right? But, things do happen, say loss of business, loss of relationship, loss of a loved one, that might push someone into a depressive state. And hopefully they have the support, which is very essential when it comes to mental illness. They have the support to help pull them out of it before it becomes more chronic.
Okay. So with depression, sometimes people hit that addiction for drug and alcohol.
Right.
Which one do you think is more a problem right now in our community?
Oh, it's a case of the chicken or the egg. Because sometimes people feel depressed, they might use a substance, say alcohol, to help them feel better, and then they get even more depressed because now they're drinking. So it becomes such a vicious circle. But I think substance use has definitely spiked, and they go together. They're often co-occurring disorders. So someone who's depressed might be using substance to feel better, which will make them even more depressed. But if you can get someone out of that depressive state, and then you can start to work on their substance use disorder.
So what is one thing, as our viewer is listening right now, what is one thing you might want to bring to their attention when you said if you hit that stage? Maybe several of them does not know what that state is.
Right. So I'm going to use, because we're in a season that most people get what's called seasonal affective disorder, and I think that we should talk about it more. Sometimes people who maybe primarily grew up in tropical areas have like a drop in energy during the season, and most people talk about it, but they don't really know that it's actually a thing. So it is a disorder. It's called seasonal affective disorder. It means that for a few weeks or months during this period of the year, you have low energy, low motivation, inability to focus, just fatigued. Sometimes you get back home from work. On a normal day, the sun's still out, you have time to walk around the yard, do something with the kids, play. But during this period, you go home and you just want to go to bed because you have no energy left. It's a real thing. And I just want to put that out there. If someone's experiencing that, it's seasonal. It does go away. It doesn't reach the criteria for depression or major depression diagnosis. And people who sometimes have never been depressed could still go through this during the season, and we don't talk about it enough. And of course, there's also the stress that comes with the holiday season for most people. So, but I would say watch out for extreme sadness, when someone just starts to cries easily for no reason, sudden mood swings, you're happy and then you're sad, and just feeling of worthlessness and hopelessness. Those are the key. And then there's the inability to sleep. There's the insomnia. There's maybe sleeping too much. There's your appetite is affected. Either you're eating too much or not eating enough. These things are more of the most serious telltale signs of major depression.
Okay. So in your, you deal with a lot of people with mental health problems before. Some people are afraid to reach out to mental health. Can you kind of help our viewer understand why it is important to reach out for help?
Right. So there's definitely a stigma. And in some communities, more than some. I would say, for instance, the Black African American community have a very strong stigma attached to seeking help for mental health disorder, because it's not something that's talked about within the homes. So when someone's feeling out of sorts, they don't really know how to have that conversation. But I'm going to put it this way. When someone's hurt and bleeding, they go for care, right? They seek out a doctor. The same thing when you're feeling out of sorts mentally, emotionally, psychologically, there's a reason. And going to check that out doesn't mean that you're weak or less able. I see it as being proactive. As a matter of fact, halfway through grad school, I realized that I wanted to be more on the preventive side of mental health care than after the fact. Because most people, by the time they get to me as a therapist, they're already dealing with depression, anxiety, and a lot of stress and angst and about life stresses, not able to manage their stress or cope. But having what I call good mental care hygiene prevents people from getting to that point where now you might need medication. Now some people have a breakdown and get hospitalized. And that's because they've ignored a lot of things, a lot of signs that things might not be going well with them, and just kept going because they were afraid to ask for help. And I would say that I know there's a stigma. I know it's hard to talk about it, but think about what if there was, somebody you could talk to learn some skills and how to deal with challenges, which we all go through, every single person. throughout life. Things are going to happen that might affect your functioning. And I like to use ROSE as an acronym. So those core functioning are your relational, occupational, emotional, or social well-being. Mm-hmm. So if anything happens and is affecting any part of this area to the point where now you're not able to get up and go to work, now you don't want to see people, you're isolating. Now you don't want to be around families, friends are calling, you're not picking up. Now you're impacted. Your functionality is impacted. So what would you choose? Take preventive care, talk to somebody on a regular basis just for maintenance, or wait until now you're unable to function and now start looking for a therapist. And I can tell you the wait lists are long. There's not enough therapists for the people who are looking for help. So having that relationship already built with a therapist means that, you can do like bi-weekly or monthly check-ins. Just if everything is fine, you're fine. Mm-hmm. But then something happens suddenly, you say, hey, I'm going through this and I need a session. And I think most of the people I support do that. They don't need me often weekly or bi-weekly, but we maintain a relationship. So when tough things happen, they can reach out and say, hey, I know somebody I can talk to.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at the, because of COVID, a lot of people, yes, kids especially, I'm thinking of the teenagers, yes, who were home for all that time frame. And some of them are out of touch with how to communicate. They'd rather be behind their phone. And do you think that can lead to depression? That can lead to them having anxiety and going back into the real world?
Absolutely. There was a research put out by, I think it was the MAMSA, which is the Mental Health Association of the United States. And there's been a spike, I think 72% spike in anxiety within teenagers, and a really, I don't have the exact numbers, hike in suicide rates within teenagers. So, I mean, the last 1.5 years have been tough on a lot of people, but it was very, very tough on teenagers. I remember when COVID hit, I was working with a school system in Southborough, and I remember those students just being devastated that now they have to be home and don't see their friends. And we did run a lot of groups during the season just to kind of help them transition, and we would get all their friends, have a group on Facebook, on Zoom, just to have groups for them to get together, but it wasn't the same.
Yes.
And it sounded like we were going to be locked down for a month, 2, 3, and then it lasted 2 years, and we're still in it. So I can't even, no doubt, the teenagers have been impacted greatly.
For any mothers who's like watching this right now and they're not sure what to do because the kids has changed dramatically.
Right.
The behavior has changed, their sleeping pattern, eating pattern. What would you advise a parent like that who's going through those changes?
And I would say the biggest thing to look out for is isolation. When a teen is in their room, which is already what teenagers do, but this period to just pay closer attention because, back in the day, you worried about kids being out and being bullied in the schoolyard, on the streets. But now they could be being bullied right under your roof. And whoever is bullying them has direct access to them to hurt them and say things that would make them question themselves or impact their mental health. And I know it's not an easy conversation, but just being aware of what your kids are doing online. Most of the, like I say, bullying and taunting that happens these days is through social media and text and people sharing images they're not supposed to. And some parents have figured out a way to, put some monitoring kind of barriers and see what the kids are doing. And some parents aren't even aware of the dangers that might be lurking in their kids' bedroom, right in there where they're communicating with people who are hurting them but not being able to say anything. And just talk to your children, you know, and sometimes they might be going through something and they feel like they can't tell anyone about it because maybe they're from a household where those kind of conversations aren't being had. I would encourage parents to normalize it. You know, talk to kids at the dinner table and say, hey, how are you feeling, really? What's going on? And maybe take them out for ice cream or tea, something, have conversations with them, because it's really important that kids feel safe enough to go talk to their parents or guardian or whoever the adult in their life is when something terrible is happening that's impacting their mental health.
Yeah. So communication and reconnecting with our kids would be key right here.
Absolutely.
Right now, to kind of like make sure that not monitoring them, not yelling or anything like that, because that tends to drive them away more.
Exactly.
The best thing would be to communicate in a nicer way with the kids. Yeah. Is there anything else you felt like it's important for our viewers to understand about mental health, the impact of it, and the best way to deal with it, especially if you have someone who's going through it and you're not sure? Is there any resources you know of that the person can look into or find to kind of support them?
Absolutely. So, you know, like I said earlier, oftentimes when kids are going through stuff, parents kind of feel like just leave them alone or push and pressure. Like you say, that's usually not the best thing. What you're doing at that point is creating more of a hostile environment that doesn't make room for, you know, problem solving. Number one, start with communication. Hopefully the kids trust you to talk to you. And then depending on the severity, we have a few community mental health agencies. There's advocates, there's SMOC, there's Wayside, and I think Wayside has a pretty robust youth program. And they will provide counseling and other case management, peer support, so does advocates. And they have dedicated programs and groups that you can sign kids up for if they were still on the waiting list to see a one-on-one therapist, to see a therapist for individual counseling or family counseling. They have a few groups online that you can sign kids up for, just so they can go socialize with other kids, maybe talk about whatever it is they're going through, because, you know, we find that sometimes people feel more comfortable sharing when they're in a kind of a peer group where people are going through the same things. So we do have those groups available through these agencies. And when it becomes like a big emergency, we do have what's called psychiatric emergency services. It's called PES, and their number is online. It's Advocates actually has one, and they would send somebody over if it's a crisis. And they've put in some programs to avoid visits, regular visits to the emergency room. So they will almost try to triage versus just going to the emergency room and sitting there for hours. So that's one. And then another one that's called to talk. They wouldn't come out to the house, but they will talk to somebody on the phone and provide resources. And then there's Good Samaritans. And all these numbers are easily accessible. Hopefully the producers might share it at the end. And then there's the suicide hotline, and that's nationwide, and they have representatives on the phone to talk to anyone and help, talk them through whatever it is they're going through. So there are resources out there.
Perfect. Now, all those resources are not only for teenagers or certain group, they are for everyone.
Absolutely.
Because mental health does not impact a certain group of people. It impacts all of us, because we are all human.
Absolutely.
So if you, when you think of, a kid being bullied at school, and knowing that that's going to occur online, because now they take it from school to online, which sometimes the school can't interfere with it.
Right.
And you know, you have to get the police involved. Do you think there is a way we can prevent those type of bullying against our kids?
Oh, it's hard because on one hand, they now have access to the world.
Unfortunately.
At the tip of their finger. So it's harder to control what they do and who they interact with. And some parents do try and have all the security measures and privacy settings on there. But it's harder, especially when they get to that 15, 16 age. But I think cyberbullying has a different type of a process from regular bullying at school. I think some schools have put in additional measures to help deal with cyberbullying if it's being perpetuated by students in the same school. Like you said, police have to be involved, and no parents want that. And I mean, if you've had teenagers, you know that sometimes when you're telling them stop, that's when they're like running the other way, and that can be challenging. And unfortunately, people do get hurt. People do, it leads to suicide, and you know, which is like the worst case scenario. But you know, various mental health disorders get triggered and exacerbated because people are being taunted and bullied. So I think the police is taking it a little more seriously, and the school system has put in a bit more measures to help deal with cyberbullying if it's happening within the school.
Perfect. So mental health challenges impact all of us.
Yes.
And of one form or another, whether it's a mild depression to manic depression. At the end of the day, would you agree that reaching out to someone, not a friend or anyone like that, someone who's like a therapist, someone, a professional, to kind of like guide you to what the next step should be, or give you tools to kind of help you from point A to point B.
Absolutely. And like I said, I am a therapist, and I'm available taking new clients. But the important part is that initial assessment to check the severity of, you know, what someone is going through, if you should maybe be sending them to a psychiatrist, or if they might be needing a short hospital stay, because, you know, people do go through things. Like I said, I'm a therapist and I see a therapist. I do that just for my own well-being, because I prefer that continued staying connected, working through things, not waiting until things start to bubble up before asking for help, which never works. So, yes.
Perfect. So there you have it, folks. Thank you so much, Nikki, for coming in and share your experiences with us and gave our viewers a few resources where they can reach out for help, especially right now during this holidays. We are going to have a number of people who's going through depression because they don't have anyone for the holidays, or they don't have anyone to share it with them. Elderlies as well is a big part of right now who needs support. If you know an elderly who lives by him or herself, reach out to that person. I want to say pay it forward, help each other. We kind of help each other out.
Because community, at the end of the day, is really what we need. So years ago, there was a Harvard study about what really makes for a valuable, meaningful life. And it wasn't the richest guy. It wasn't the most handsome guy. It was the person who had the most social connectedness that lived a happier, longer life. And this study followed a group of boys from South Boston from maybe age 6, 7 through their 70s. It was the longest longitudinal study ever. And it determined that when you have a community, you have better outcomes, health outcomes, whether physical health, mental health. So being able to reach out, having that discernment to reach out to people is a good practice. And like you said, people during the holidays who have experienced loss, it tends to bring up memories of the people, the loved ones they've missed. So being able to provide people some community, I think is a really good way to pay it forward this season.
Mm-hmm. And also trauma can trigger anxiety and depression, even suicidal.
Absolutely.
So do not wait. If you feel like you need assistance, if things is not the way it should be, there are resources out there. You are not alone. Before doing anything at all, I urge you to find someone, a mental health, or even call the toll-free numbers for Good Samaritan Health or suicide hotline, because those mental health can cripple you. They can impact you as we all have our flaws and our positiveness, but when you get hit with that depression or any type of mental health, it crippled who you are. Mm-hmm. And there's help out there. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Thoughtful Life Coach. And once again, Nikki, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being here with us. Next week, we are going to have a different guest with us. I hope you come back to see us. We're going to talk about, opium, a big addiction right now in our community, in our society. We need to get our mind, our body, all in one package so we can be the best version of us. Until we meet again, stay true to yourself.